So I've decided to do something new. More specifically, I'm going to torture myself in the unlikely hope that somebody would actually see it and enjoy it. I decided to watch as many movies on the IMDb bottom 100 as possible. A list of the 100 lowest rated movies on IMDb. I'm going to make a video about them every second week in addition to my other reviews of more recent, probably better movies. And by see as many as possible, I mean that in the laziest way imaginable. I'm just going to look for those that are streaming on some service that I already have or for free somewhere. Because I'm not paying for any of this shit. It's not even worth legally downloading. If I'm going to break the law and potentially get a virus, it's not going to be for one of these movies. I've decided to go from the bottom up, almost like I'm actually getting the countdown experience. Although, as it turns out, not every movie is streaming somewhere easily, and I've had to start all the way at number 90, which is streaming for free on Tubi. Maybe I'll start back at the bottom when I'm finished with all this and see if anything new's been put on the list and if some other streaming site has added others. But for now, let's start talking about number 90, The Hungover Games. A spoof movie. Great. Released in 2014, this is a mashup of The Hangover and The Hunger Games, and whatever else they can try to cram in there. Despite what you may probably believe now, this actually isn't from the infamous parody directing team Jason Friedman and Aaron Saltzer. Shocking, I know. Yeah, they came up with The Starving Games, completely different movie. Now, unlike my normal reviews, I'm probably going to simply not mention the director's name for most of these unless completely necessary. I wouldn't wish that credit on my worst enemies. But since I've already mentioned who didn't direct it, I should probably say who did. It was directed by Josh Stolberg, a guy who has written just enough decent things for him to at least know better than to do a movie that copies from the Friedberg and Salter catalog like this. I mean, he wrote for Avatar The Last Airbender. Additional writing for 2 episodes, but still. He even wrote a decent movie that is self-aware enough to be considered a sort of parody. Well, I guess he must have needed that money. At least he didn't write the script. Anyway, on to the actual movie. It's slightly better than I was expecting. Don't get me wrong, it's still awful. Completely unwatchable, but at least it feels like a movie, not just an excuse to reference other, better films. I've only seen one Friedberg and Salzer movie before, Epic Movie, and it was when it came out on DVD years ago, and I was in middle school, so it's not exactly fresh in my memory. But from what I remember, The Hungover Games was a little better. The most prominent criticism I hear about these directors is that they just reference other movies instead of actual making attempts at humor, and as bad as the jokes here are, they are at least still jokes. It shows a little bit of promise in its opening scene, basically the opening of The Hangover when the main characters make a call to the wedding to tell them that the groom is missing, except they're in the middle of the Hunger Games arena surrounded by dead bodies. A decently amusing scene that could have introduced a good 5 to 10 minute internet video by some college humor type. The only problem is this is a feature-length movie. The rest of the movie is bottom of the barrel sex jokes. This movie is rated R and they take full advantage of that rating, cramming as much sex and language as they can fit in, done with all the tact of a little boy who just learned the F word. Seriously, there is some truly juvenile stuff in here. For example, in one scene near the end, the character's love interest, who's supposed to be underage by the way, is dying and she decides to show him her breast before she dies. And it's treated as the culmination of their relationship. Because that is the most intimate part of any relationship. Movie. Oh yeah, the plot. So it's basically The Hangover, except the night before they've taken drugs so powerful that they've transported them into a dystopian future, and they woke up as tributes for the titular Hungover Games. It's basically like the Hunger Games, but for movie characters that are forced to fight to the death using sex toys. And of course all the other tributes are from completely different movies that leave it dated today. There's an Avatar character, there's a Ted character, there's a goddamn Lone Ranger character. Hey, remember that remake of Carrie they made? No? Well, she's here also. And there are even references that have to have been dated even when this movie came out. I mean, Johnny Depp's Willy Wonka, a Borat impression, and then there's the gratuitous nudity district, a bunch of naked women who aren't from any movie. I'm guessing this is supposed to satirize the use of gratuitous nudity in movies. Once again, this movie was released in 2014. Every movie was aiming for a PG-13 rating since long before this movie came out. And even among recent R-rated movies, very few of them use nudity this graphic. To get an idea for how graphic this movie is, these aren't even the only girls to get naked. Who am I kidding? This is from the guy who wrote Piranha 3D. They just put that in so they can show tits. Probably in the hopes that this would distract people from how bad the rest of the movie is. I'd say Friedberg and Salsa should take notes, but the only people who have a chance of finding this kind of thing funny can't get into R-rated movies. Anyway, back to what I was saying earlier. Everyone is from different movies and they're all mostly outdated, but here's the catch. Once they introduce the lineup for the games, get this, they stop referencing other movies. I mean, there are a couple brief references to the human centipede and Taken, but they really only last a couple minutes at most. This allows for the parody characters to actually have time to do their thing, and give off the illusion that they are a character in an actual movie. Unfortunately, the writers have no idea how to do them in any kind of subversive way. Hey, what if we have Thor, but he's a gay stereotype? What about Ted, but he has a visible penis throughout the whole film? What about the Muppets, but they say bad words? What about the little girl from the Hunger Games, but she says bad words? What about a Mockingjay that says bad words? How about one of the blue girls from Avatar, but she has a 5-second affair with Zach Galifianakis' character from The Hangover, and after she dies, she decides to feel her breasts one last time? Yeah, that's the thing that actually happens in this movie. Which brings me on to another pointless tangent. As I've said earlier, Carrie is in this movie, and she spends most of it covered in blood from unknown origin. So one of the trailers I used to edit this video has her tinted gold, and she looks nothing like Carrie, and more like some random girl cosplaying as someone killed by Goldfinger. And I kinda get that, trying to make it more accessible so that it can play before more movies, but then how the hell did this get into that same trailer?
I'm 17.
Also, those sex moans were not in the movie. They added them in specifically for this trailer. But thank God they edited out the color red. Imagine if a little kid saw that before a movie. Anyway, back to the actual movie. Most of it revolves around the three Hangover characters and their interactions that feel like scenes from a much more lowbrow version of their movie, so I guess that's a positive for authenticity. But then again, what the hell could you do to parody movies that don't take themselves seriously? This goes double for movies like Ted and Borat that are even sillier. At some point, it's basically just the writer's fan fiction. There's one scene at the end that comments on how useless the character of Doug is in the franchise, but other than that, you're basically just copying and pasting the characters and story of both movies referenced in the title. You know, one of the few things that make this brand of parody the tiniest bit enjoyable is the mild amusement of seeing what kind of story they come up with by combining all these movies. I'd be interested in seeing the version of Epic Movie from a parallel universe where none of the movies that are parodied exist, and this weird nonsensical story is actually played straight. Well, the plot of the Hungover games is actually coherent, and I can't tell whether that makes it less or more enjoyable in that regard. Either way, this movie blows. It may half know that just making references doesn't automatically make comedy, but it doesn't know that just saying dirty things doesn't automatically make comedy either. I love parody films. Mel Brooks is amazing. The Hungover games suck. It gets a full star for a few funny parts, although I may have just found them funny because the rest of the movie was so painful that my standards were lowered. Other than that, this movie is about as fun as an actual hangover.
Hangover, 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 hangover.
Also, if you think that song is too outdated, then that just reinforces why it's perfect for this review. It even came out the same year, so it's exactly as outdated as this movie.